June 15, 1944, 8:47 a.m. A Japanese machine gun opens fire at point-blank range and cuts down 11 Marines in 4 seconds. Frank Taksky watches them fall. He does not stop moving. He was 29 years old, a lieutenant from New Brighton, Pennsylvania. Behind him, 40 men sprint through the surf as artillery shells detonate in the water around them. These are not ordinary Marines. Every single one of them was pulled from a military prison or punishment detail. Thieves, brawlers, men the Marine Corps had tried to throw away. In the next 72 hours, they will go deeper behind enemy lines than any American unit on Saipan. They will face 30,000 Japanese soldiers, and they will change the way America fights war forever. 7 months before that beach, 994 Marines died on Tarawa in 76 hours. Colonel James Risley of the 6th Marine Regiment sat in a command tent after the battle and looked at the casualty numbers. The math was simple and brutal. The Marine Corps was walking into fortified positions it could not see. Artillery could not hit what it could not find. Infantry could not avoid what it did not know was there. Men were dying because nobody was going in first to look. Risley requested permission to form a scout sniper platoon, the kind of unit that would go ahead of the main force, find the enemy, map their positions, radio coordinates back, then disappear into the jungle and do it again. The Marine Corps approved it and gave him 1 man to make it happen. Frank Taksky received the assignment with a specific problem. He needed men who could silently navigate without maps, survive for days without support, and make life or death decisions in seconds without orders from above. Standard Marine training produced excellent riflemen. It did not produce this. Taksky needed something different. He needed men who had already proven they would survive at any cost. He found them exactly where everyone else had stopped looking. When 2 Marines got into a fight, the winner went to the brig and the loser went to the infirmary. Taksky went to the brig. A man with a disciplinary record for fighting had already proven one thing in a world where everything was uncertain. He would still be standing when it was over. Over 2 months at Camp Tarawa in Hawaii, Taksky assembled 42 Marines from punishment details across the 2nd Marine Division. The youngest was 17. The oldest was 34. Most had criminal records before they ever put on a uniform. Several had been arrested for assault and theft. One was a former professional boxer. Another had worked as a bodyguard for a Chicago gangster. The Marine Corps had given these men a choice between military prison and combat duty. Every one of them chose combat. Other Marines across the regiment watched this group steal food from Army depots, equipment from Navy warehouses, and jeeps from anyone who left them unguarded. They started calling them the 40 Thieves. The name was meant as an insult. Taksky's men wore it like a medal. Training at Camp Tarawa was unlike anything else in the Marine Corps. Taksky taught them to approach a sentry from behind and break his neck without making sound. He taught them to move through jungle terrain without disturbing a single leaf. They learned to read Japanese military maps and decode enemy tactical formations. They fired M1903, Springfield rifles with 8-power scopes, and learned to hit a man-sized target at 600 yards. They studied how the Japanese defended islands where they positioned their machine guns, how they built their bunkers, how they thought. Then they learned to steal Japanese supplies when their own ran out, because in the Pacific, the Marine Corps was the poorest equipped branch in the American military, and survival often depended on taking what you needed from someone else. By June 1944, the 40 Thieves were ready, and Saipan was waiting. The intelligence briefing was not encouraging. Saipan was the first Japanese home territory the Americans had ever attempted to invade. The island was 14 miles long and 5 miles wide. Mount Tapotchau rose 1,500 feet in the center and gave the Japanese observation over every beach. The garrison numbered 30,000 Imperial Army and Navy troops, plus thousands of armed civilians. Every beach had been registered for artillery fire. Every valley had been zeroed for mortars. Concrete pillboxes, interconnected trenches, and underground bunker systems covered the entire island. American planners estimated casualties would exceed 50%. Scout sniper units in the Pacific Theater averaged 73%. Taksky briefed his men the night before the landing. Their mission was to go in with the first assault wave push inland ahead of the main force, locate Japanese positions, and radio coordinates back to artillery and naval gunfire units. Then keep moving. No support. No rescue if captured. Stay alive and keep sending information. At 8:44 a.m. on June 15, 1944, Taksky crouched in a Higgins boat 300 yards from Saipan's southern beach as Japanese artillery shells walked through the surf around him. He did not look at the island. He looked at his men. At 8:47 a.m., the ramp dropped. The 40 thieves hit the beach running as machine gun fire swept the waterline. Marines died in the surf. Marines died at the seawall. Taksky did not stop. His orders were to keep moving, and his men followed him inland at a dead sprint while the assault waves piled up behind them on the sand. By 9:30 a.m., they had pushed 300 yards into the jungle, farther than any other Marine unit on the island. They were alone in enemy territory, with 30,000 Japanese soldiers somewhere in the trees ahead, and no American forces within shouting distance. Night would fall in 9 hours. That was when the real mission would begin. The platoon moved in a spread formation 50 yards apart, maintaining visual contact through hand signals Taksky had invented during training. At 10:15 a.m., Sergeant Bill Knuppel stopped and held up his fist. Everyone froze. He pointed toward a ridge. A concrete pillbox sat built into the hillside with interlocking fields of fire covering the valley below. Type 92 heavy machine gun, crew of 7. Camouflaged with vegetation and completely invisible from the beach. Marine assault units would advance through that valley in 4 hours. They would walk directly into the kill zone, and dozens of them would die before anyone understood where the fire was coming from. Taksky made the decision in 30 seconds. Private Marvin Strombo positioned himself 80 yards from the pillbox with a bazooka. At 10:32 a.m., he fired one round. The rocket hit the firing slit and detonated inside. The entire Japanese crew died instantly. Before the smoke cleared, the 40 thieves had already moved 300 yards deeper into the jungle and left no trace they had ever been there. When 2nd Marine Division units advanced through that valley 4 hours later, the machine gun that should have killed them was already gone. By noon, they had identified and mapped 17 Japanese positions. 8 machine gun nests, 4 mortar pits, 3 artillery observation posts, 2 ammunition storage areas. Taksky radioed the coordinates back to regimental headquarters. Within 20 minutes, naval gunfire from destroyers offshore began destroying the targets one by one. The 40 thieves watched from concealed positions as 5-inch shells demolished fortifications they had marked half an hour earlier. They were 2 miles inland by early afternoon, farther into Saipan than any American would reach for 3 more days. At 3:40 p.m., they found something that stopped Taksky cold. 37. Type 97 medium tanks sat under camouflage netting in a grove north of Sharan Kanoa. Marine intelligence had estimated the Japanese possessed maybe a dozen tanks on the entire island. The 40 thieves had just found 3 times that number in one location. Taksky radioed the coordinates immediately. The response came back in 8 minutes. Naval gunfire was already committed. Airstrikes were committed. Artillery was still being offloaded from ships. No assets available for at least 4 hours. By then it would be dark. By then the tanks would be moving. Taksky looked at 37 tanks and then looked at his 6 bazookas. 36 rockets total. The math was almost perfect. He gave the order to prepare for assault. A 40-man unit does not attack a tank battalion. He had not recruited men who followed rules. At 4:15 p.m., the bazooka teams began moving into position in a semicircle around the staging area. Then the tanks started their engines, all 37 of them simultaneously. The sound filled the jungle like thunder. Japanese crews climbed out of dugouts and onto their vehicles. Officers shouted orders. Infantry units began forming around the armor. This was not repositioning. This was preparation for attack. Taxki checked his watch. 4:28 p.m. Sunset was at 7:12. The window for surprise had just closed. He made a new decision in seconds. The platoon would shadow the formation and provide real-time coordinates. Attacking now accomplished nothing except getting his men killed. Tracking the tanks and calling in their movements would give Marine defensive units time to prepare. The 40 thieves followed the enemy column through the jungle for the next 2 hours, staying 200 yards to the flank, transmitting position updates every 10 minutes. Marine units at the beach redistributed bazookas. Sherman tanks moved forward. Artillery adjusted aim points. The entire 2nd Marine Division shifted to meet a threat it would never have seen coming, without 40 men in the jungle calling it in. At 7:23 p.m. the Japanese attack began. The 40 thieves watched from elevated ground as enemy armor rolled forward through the twilight. Marine defensive positions opened up with bazooka fire. The first 3 tanks exploded. 34 more kept coming. Then Taxki saw one tank separate from the main formation. It was moving toward the 6th Marine Regiment command post. Moving through a ravine that led directly to Colonel Risley. Moving toward the man coordinating the entire divisional response to the attack. If that tank reached the command post, it would destroy radio equipment, kill senior officers, and collapse the Marine defense at the exact moment it was needed most. Risley had no idea it was coming. Taxki grabbed Private Herbert Hodges, the best bazooka shooter in the platoon, and they ran down the slope at full speed. They reached a position 30 yards from the tank's path at 7:31 p.m. Hodges dropped prone and aimed. The tank emerged from the ravine 20 seconds later. Its turret was rotating, searching. The commander stood in the open hatch with binoculars. Hodges waited. Moving target. He needed a side shot to penetrate 50 millimeters of frontal armor. 25 yards. 20. 15. The tank stopped. The commander was checking his map. Hodges fired at 7:32 p.m. The rocket hit the left side just below the turret ring, where the armor was thinnest. The shaped charge penetrated and detonated inside the crew compartment. 4 men died instantly. The ammunition cooked off 6 seconds later, and the entire vehicle erupted in a fireball that lit up 300 yards of jungle. Japanese infantry nearby saw the explosion and assumed they had hit a major Marine defensive position. They redirected their entire assault away from the command post and toward what they believed was a larger threat. One bazooka round had just misdirected an entire Japanese infantry battalion, but the muzzle flash had revealed the 40 thieves' position to every enemy soldier within 500 yards. Machine gun fire began raking the area. Mortars started falling. The platoon had to move immediately or be overrun. They split into teams of 4 and 5, moving independently through darkness toward predetermined rally points, while Japanese patrols swept the jungle behind them. By 9 p.m., 23 men had reached the primary rally point. 17 were still missing in the dark, somewhere between the 40 thieves and 30,000 Japanese soldiers. The night was just getting started. 17 men were still missing somewhere in the jungle behind 30,000 Japanese soldiers. That was where we left Frank Taxki and the 40 thieves at the end of part 1. 23 men had made it back to the rally point. 17 had not. And somewhere in the darkness between Marine lines and the enemy garrison, those men were either hiding, running, or already dead. Taxki had one night to find them. Then Colonel Risley's orders were clear. At dawn on June 17th, the 40 thieves would go back in. But what happened over the next 72 hours would not stay on Saipan. What Taxki's men proved in that jungle would travel all the way back to Washington, and when it arrived, it would run directly into the one enemy the 40 thieves had never trained to fight: their own chain of command. The search began at first light on June 16th. Taxki assembled 4 teams of 4 men each and sent them back into the jungle at 6:30 a.m., retracing the platoon's route from the night before. The first body appeared at 7:05 a.m. Private Donald Evans, shot twice in the chest during the withdrawal. He had died instantly. His dog tags were missing. The Japanese collected them as trophies. By 10 a.m., 6 more men had been found alive. They had become separated in the darkness, but successfully evaded Japanese patrols and reached Marine lines at scattered points along the perimeter. At 11:15 a.m., a search team made radio contact. 5 more Marines were alive inside a cave system 1 mile behind Japanese lines, pinned down and unable to move. Tatsuki led the rescue himself. 6 men, 1 mile of enemy territory in broad daylight. They reached the cave at 12:33 p.m., extracted the 5 men, and were fighting their way back through a Japanese ambush by 1:23 p.m. They killed 20 enemy soldiers in 7 seconds. They descended a box canyon, found a hidden fissure in the rock wall, pushed through it in complete darkness, and emerged on the other side of the ridge behind the Japanese search parties. All 11 men crossed back into Marine lines at 2:23 p.m. By nightfall on June 16, 34, of the original 42 men were accounted for. 6 were confirmed dead. 2 more bodies were found the following morning by advancing Marine units. 3 were never recovered and remained officially listed as missing in action. The 40 thieves had taken a 22% casualty rate in their first 48 hours on Saipan. And Colonel Risley's after-action report filed that evening contained a single paragraph that would set everything in motion. He wrote that the scout sniper platoon had identified over 200 enemy positions, called in coordinates that destroyed dozens of fortifications, neutralized a tank threatening the regimental command post, and provided real-time intelligence on a 37-tank assault that would otherwise have reached American supply areas undetected. He estimated their reconnaissance work had reduced Marine casualties in the first 2 days by a minimum of 15%. He recommended immediate expansion of scout sniper operations across all Marine divisions in the Pacific. That report reached Marine Corps headquarters in Washington 3 weeks later. The response came back in 10 days. Request denied. The officer who denied it was Brigadier General Howard Turney, Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations, a 22-year Marine Corps veteran who had served in Nicaragua, Haiti, and the Caribbean campaigns of the 1920s and 1930s. Turney had spent his career mastering conventional infantry tactics, and he held a specific view of how Marine units should operate, together, in formation, under centralized command. He summoned Risley to a meeting in Washington in late July 1944. Tatsuki attended as the officer with direct operational experience. Turney did not wait for pleasantries. He dropped Risley's report on the desk and said, "You're asking me to institutionalize a unit that operates without supervision, ignores tactical doctrine, and recruits from the brig. You're asking me to tell every Marine Division commander in the Pacific to send their criminals into the jungle alone and trust them to make decisions that affect entire divisions." Risley said, "I'm asking you to look at the numbers, General." "I've looked at your numbers," Turney said. 22% casualties in 48 hours. In what universe does that represent a model worth replicating? Tatsuki spoke without being invited to. The average casualty rate for scout units in the Pacific is 73% general. We came in at 22. The units we supported came in at 11% below the divisional average for the Saipan operation. Those numbers don't come from luck. Turney looked at him for a long moment. "Lieutenant, you will speak when spoken to." The meeting ended without a decision. Risley was told the request would be reviewed. In Marine Corps language, that meant it would sit in a file until someone forgot about it. Meanwhile, the fighting on Tinian began in July 1944, and the 40 thieves deployed again, this time with no official authorization for expansion and no additional resources. But Tatsuki had found his unexpected ally, and it came from a direction nobody anticipated. Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner commanded the amphibious forces that had put Marines on every beach in the Pacific. He was not a man who read after-action reports from lieutenant colonels. He was a man who read casualty figures, and the casualty figures from Saipan had disturbed him. The naval gunfire supporting Marine landings was devastating Japanese fortifications that had already been identified. It was doing almost nothing against positions that remained hidden until Marines walked into them at close range. Turner's intelligence officer showed him Risley's report. Turner read the paragraph about the tank battalion. 37 tanks that Marine aerial reconnaissance had completely missed, located by 40 men on foot in 4 hours. Turner called Risley directly. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. Turner asked one question. If he expanded the Scout Sniper program to every Marine division in the Pacific, how long would it take to train units to the 40 Thieves standard? Risley said 6 months minimum. Taxkey, listening from across the room, said 3 months if they had the right men and the right instructors. Turner said, "Get me a formal training proposal by September 1st, and find me a location where you can run a demonstration. I want to see this myself before I take it to the Commandant." The demonstration was scheduled for October 3, 1944, at Camp Pendleton, California. The audience would include Turner, 2 Marine Division commanders, a representative from the Joint Chiefs, and the same Brigadier General Turney, who had shut down the expansion request 3 months earlier. Taxkey had 30 days to design a demonstration that would convince skeptical senior officers that what the 40 Thieves had done on Saipan was not luck accident or the result of exceptional individual skill. He needed to prove it was replicable, that ordinary men trained correctly could do what his platoon had done. He selected 12 Marines from Camp Pendleton's general population. No brig recruits this time. Random infantrymen with no special operations background. He ran them through a compressed version of the 40 Thieves training curriculum. Silent movement, position identification, coordinate transmission, independent decision-making under fire. He had 30 days and he used every hour of them. October 3rd arrived cold and overcast. Camp Pendleton's training range had been configured to represent a section of Pacific Island terrain with fortified positions built to Japanese specifications concealed throughout a 2-mile area. Marine engineers had constructed 12 hidden emplacements, each with specific coordinates. The general officers observing did not know the exact locations. The 12-man demonstration unit did not know either. Their mission was identical to what the 40 Thieves had done on Saipan. Go in, find the positions, radio coordinates, get out. Turney stood next to Turner at the observation post at 0800 hours and said nothing. He had reviewed the training records. 12 men with 30 days of preparation. He privately believed the demonstration would fail, and that would end the matter permanently. At 08:15, the demonstration unit moved into the training area. At 09:23, the first coordinates came over the radio. Position 1. Grid, reference confirmed. The range officer checked his map. Accurate to within 8 yards. At 09:41, position 2. Accurate to 12 yards. At 10:04, positions 3 and 4 transmitted simultaneously, indicating the unit had split into 2 teams operating independently. Both accurate. Both transmitted within 90 seconds of each other. By 11:47 hours, the unit had located and reported 10 of the 12 hidden positions in 3 hours and 32 minutes. The 2 positions they missed were the most heavily camouflaged on the range ones the Marine engineers had specifically designed to defeat aerial reconnaissance and ground observation simultaneously. The range officer turned to Turner. Standard Marine infantry doctrine estimated that a conventional platoon of 40 men would require approximately 18 hours to clear and identify the same area using traditional search methods and would produce accurate coordinates on perhaps 60% of hidden positions. 12 men, 3 hours and 32 minutes, 83% accuracy. Turney said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Run it again." The demonstration unit re-entered the range at 1300 hours. The engineers had repositioned 4 of the 12 emplacements. At 1521 hours, the unit transmitted their final coordinates. 11 of 12 positions identified. 92% accuracy. 2 hours and 21 minutes. Turner turned to Turney. "Howard, talk to me." Turney took off his cover and looked at the range for a long moment. "I've been running infantry operations for 20 years, he said. "I have never seen anything like that." Turner approved the expansion program the following morning. 6 Scout Sniper platoons, 1 per Marine division in the Pacific, each trained to the 40 Thieves standard. Tokski was assigned as chief instructor. The program would be classified at the secret level. Training would begin at Camp Pendleton in November 1944. The first class of 240 Marines began training on November 8, 1944. Tokski ran them through the same curriculum he had built at Camp Tarawa, expanded and refined based on everything the 40 thieves had learned on Saipan and Tinian. Silent approach, position mapping, independent operation, bazooka employment against armor, and the thing he considered most important of all, how to make a correct tactical decision with no time, no information, and no one to ask. By January 1945, the first 2 platoons had completed training and deployed to support operations in the Philippines. Their first week produced intelligence that destroyed 14 Japanese artillery positions that had been shelling American supply lines for 6 days. The divisional commander sent a message back to Camp Pendleton that read simply, "Where have these men been for the last 3 years?" The Japanese noticed immediately. Enemy after-action reports captured in February 1945 began referencing small American reconnaissance units operating far ahead of main forces. Japanese garrison commanders started receiving orders to increase security patrols, establish observation posts along likely infiltration routes, and report any evidence of small unit American activity behind their lines. The enemy was adapting. They were building countermeasures specifically designed to defeat what the 40 thieves had started. And in March 1945, as the 3rd class of scout snipers completed training at Camp Pendleton and prepared to deploy for the invasion of Okinawa, Tokski received a classified intelligence report that changed everything. The Japanese had captured one of the scout sniper trainees from the Philippines deployment. A 20-year-old Marine named Corporal James Whitfield, who had become separated from his unit during a reconnaissance mission and was taken prisoner before he could be recovered. The Japanese knew exactly what the Scout Sniper program was. They knew its training location. They knew its methods. And the intelligence report contained one more piece of information that hit Tokski like a physical blow. Whitfield had been interrogated for 11 days. The report did not specify what methods the Japanese had used. It did not need to. Tokski had seen what the Japanese did to American prisoners on Saipan. He had found 3 of his own men with their hands tied behind their backs. But the worst part of the report was not what the Japanese had done to Whitfield. It was what they had done with the information they extracted from him. Japanese commanders across the Pacific had received a new operational directive. Any American soldier captured operating alone or in small groups behind Japanese lines was to be executed immediately. No interrogation, no processing as a prisoner of war. The scout snipers would now be fighting an enemy that knew they existed, knew their methods, and had issued orders to kill them on sight. The program that had started with 40 criminals in a Hawaiian training camp had become something the entire Japanese military was actively hunting. And Tokski had 240 more men in the pipeline preparing to deploy directly into that danger. The war had just gotten significantly more complicated. And it was about to get worse. 40 men recruited from military prisons changed how America fights war. That is what parts 1 and 2 established. Tokski's 40 thieves proved on Saipan that small independent reconnaissance units could do what entire battalions could not. Admiral Turner approved the expansion. 240 Marines entered training at Camp Pendleton. The first 2 platoons deployed to the Philippines and immediately began destroying Japanese artillery positions that had resisted conventional assault for 6 days. Then the Japanese captured Corporal James Whitfield. They interrogated him for 11 days, and they issued a Pacific-wide directive. Any American soldier found operating alone or in small groups behind Japanese lines was to be executed immediately. The enemy now knew the program existed. They knew its methods. They were hunting for it specifically. Here is what they did next. And here is why it nearly worked. Japanese garrison commanders across the Pacific received the new directive in February 1945 and responded with a speed that surprised American intelligence analysts. Within 3 weeks, enemy units on Luzon had tripled their security patrol density along likely infiltration routes. On Iwo Jima, Japanese engineers began constructing a second layer of interior defensive positions, specifically designed to be invisible from ground level, defeating the low-angle observation the scout snipers depended on. On Okinawa Garrison, Commander General Mitsuru Ushijima personally redesigned his defensive scheme after receiving translated extracts from Whitfield's interrogation. The numbers told the story clearly. In January 1945, scout sniper platoons in the Philippines were identifying an average of 22 enemy positions per 24-hour reconnaissance mission. By March 1945, that number had dropped to 11. The Japanese had cut the program's effectiveness in half in 60 days. Ushijima's response on Okinawa was the most sophisticated. He pulled his artillery entirely underground positioning guns inside caves with angled entrances that prevented observation from any ground-level approach. He established overlapping patrol zones covering every approach route to the island's interior. He created dummy positions at ground level, convincingly constructed to attract scout sniper attention and waste American artillery ammunition on empty fortifications, while the real guns remained hidden. And he assigned special hunter units, small Japanese teams trained specifically to locate and eliminate American reconnaissance personnel operating behind his lines. By April 1945, those hunter units had killed 4 scout snipers on Okinawa and captured 2 more. American casualties in the scout sniper program jumped from 22% on Saipan to 38% in the first month of the Okinawa campaign. Taxki received the casualty reports at Camp Pendleton and read them carefully. The program he had built was losing men at a rate that would become politically unsustainable within 90 days. But the casualty figures were not the only problem arriving on his desk. The internal crisis began with a training accident on March 14, 1945. A 12-man scout sniper class at Camp Pendleton was running a live fire night exercise when a navigational error placed 2 teams on a collision course in complete darkness. Both teams opened fire simultaneously on what each believed were enemy positions. 3 Marines were wounded. 1 lost his right eye permanently. The investigation landed on Taxki's desk the following morning. The accident had occurred because the program's navigation training had not been updated to account for the larger unit sizes now being deployed. The original 40 Thieves operated as a single cohesive group that Taxki had trained personally over 6 months. The Camp Pendleton program was running 12-man classes through a 90-day curriculum that compressed that same training into 1/3 of the time. General Turney, who had opposed the program from the beginning and never fully accepted Turner's decision to approve it, submitted a formal memorandum to the Commandant's office on March 19th, recommending suspension of the Scout Sniper training program pending a full safety review. He attached the accident investigation report and 4 pages of analysis, arguing that the casualty rate increase on Okinawa demonstrated the program had lost its tactical advantage and was now simply producing additional American deaths. The memorandum found a receptive audience. The Commandant's office requested a formal response from Taxki within 10 days. If his response failed to adequately address the safety and effectiveness concerns, the program would be suspended. Taxki sat down and wrote for 2 days straight. His response was 43 pages. He acknowledged the training accident and proposed specific curriculum revisions. He analyzed the Okinawa casualty increase and argued it demonstrated enemy adaptation rather than program failure. He pointed out that the Japanese hunter units hunting his scout snipers were themselves an intelligence confirmation that the program was working. An enemy does not dedicate specialized resources to eliminating a threat that isn't threatening them. He submitted the response on March 28th. The Commandant's office did not respond immediately, and on April 4th, 1945, before any decision was reached in Washington, the battle that settled the argument began. The location was the Kakazu Ridge on Okinawa. April 4th, 1945, 0530 hours. Kakazu Ridge ran roughly east to west across the center of the island, 2 miles of steep terrain honeycombed with Japanese defensive positions. General John Hodge's 24th Corps had been battering the ridge for 4 days and had achieved nothing. 3 infantry battalions had assaulted the position and been repulsed with combined casualties of 812 men. The Japanese had 52 artillery pieces, dozens of machine gun nests, and an estimated 4,000 soldiers dug into positions that aerial reconnaissance had been completely unable to map because everything was underground. Marine Corps Scout Sniper Platoon 6, commanded by Lieutenant David Yancey and trained at Camp Pendleton under Taksky's curriculum, received the Kakazu assignment at 0200 hours on April 4th. 12 men. Their mission was to penetrate the Japanese defensive perimeter before dawn, identify artillery positions inside the cave system, and radio coordinates before the next American assault scheduled for 0800. They had 5 hours and 30 minutes. Yancey moved his team out at 0230. They covered the first mile in 40 minutes. The terrain steepened sharply. They slowed. Enemy patrols were dense. 3 times in the first 2 miles, Yancey's team froze in concealment as Japanese soldiers passed within yards. Once, a Japanese soldier stopped 8 feet from where Corporal Thomas Rinaldi was lying motionless in a shallow ditch and urinated into the brush before moving on. At 0412, Yancey's point man located the first cave entrance. Not a concealed position. A full artillery emplacement with a Type 91 howitzer visible 12 feet inside the opening and ammunition crates stacked along both walls. The cave entrance was covered by 2 machine gun positions that would make a frontal assault suicidal. Yancey marked the coordinates and kept moving. In the next 70 minutes, Platoon 6 located 9 more artillery positions, 14 machine gun emplacements, and 2 underground command posts connected by a tunnel network running the entire length of the ridge. They mapped everything. They transmitted nothing. Yancey was waiting. At 0527, with the sky beginning to lighten, Yancey transmitted all coordinates simultaneously in a single 60-second burst transmission. 10 artillery positions, 14 machine gun nests, 2 command posts, grid references accurate to within 10 yards on every target. Then Platoon 6 ran. The Japanese heard the radio transmission and immediately understood what had happened. Hunter units converged on the signal origin. Yancey's team was already 400 yards away and moving fast, abandoning all concealment for speed, crashing through brush in the growing dawn light. At 0545, American artillery opened fire on the transmitted coordinates. The first rounds hit the cave entrances, directly collapsing the openings and sealing Japanese gun crews inside. Secondary explosions began immediately as artillery ammunition stored inside the caves cooked off. The ridge shook. Smoke poured from a dozen cave entrances simultaneously. The Japanese hunter unit pursuing Yancey's team stopped. The men looked back at the ridge. Their defensive position was burning from the inside. Yancey crossed back into American lines at 0621, 47 minutes before the scheduled infantry assault. All 12 men made it. 2 had minor injuries from falling in the dark. Nobody had fired a weapon. At 824th Corps Infantry assaulted Kakazu Ridge and encountered minimal resistance for the first time in 5 days. The artillery that had stopped 3 previous assaults was destroyed or inaccessible. Machine gun positions that should have covered every approach were sealed or burning. Japanese defenders who survived the artillery barrage were disoriented, separated from their command posts, and unable to coordinate a coherent defense. American infantry reached the ridge crest at 1140 hours. The position that had cost 812 casualties over 4 days fell in 3 hours and 20 minutes with 104 American wounded and 11 killed. Japanese casualties on the ridge were estimated at 900 dead. The difference between 4 days of failure and 1 morning of success was 12 men, 5 hours and 60 seconds of radio transmission. News of Kakazu reached Washington within 48 hours. The Commandant's office withdrew Turney's suspension recommendation on April 9th without issuing a formal statement. The Scout Sniper program was not just continued, it was accelerated. 2 additional training classes began at Camp Pendleton in April 1945. A second training facility opened at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. By June 1945, 8 Scout Sniper platoons were operational across the Pacific Theater, with 4 more in final training phases. The impact on Japanese tactical planning was measurable and severe. Enemy garrison commanders began receiving intelligence reports in May 1945. describing American small unit penetration of defensive perimeters that should have been impenetrable. The reports were accurate, and the Japanese command had no answer for them. Their hunter units were finding empty terrain where American reconnaissance teams had been hours earlier. Their dummy positions were being ignored while real artillery was being destroyed. Their carefully constructed interior defensive lines were being mapped and transmitted before infantry arrived. Japanese 32nd Army records captured after the war showed that by May 1945, Okinawa's garrison command had dedicated 4,000 soldiers to anti-reconnaissance security duties. 4,000 men who were not defending beaches, not manning artillery, not preparing counterattacks. They were chasing 12-man teams through the jungle and mostly finding nothing. American assault units across Okinawa reported a measurable reduction in the effectiveness of Japanese defensive fire during the final weeks of the campaign. Marine Corps analysis conducted after the battle estimated that scout sniper intelligence contributed to a 31% reduction in American casualties during the assault phase of the Okinawa operation compared to projected figures based on Iwo Jima ratios. 31%. On an operation that had projected 40,000 American casualties. That number translated into lives was significant enough that the analysts at Marine Corps headquarters declined to print it in the unclassified version of their report. Yancey received the Navy Cross. Toksky received a letter of commendation and was promoted to captain. The 12 men of Platoon 6 received unit citations. The citations were classified. Their families received no information about what they had done. The program that had started with 40 criminals arguing over stolen food in Hawaii had become an established part of how America fought. It had reduced casualties on 3 major Pacific operations. It had forced the Japanese military to dedicate thousands of soldiers to countering 12-man teams. It had proven that the most valuable weapon in a modern land battle was not the largest gun or the fastest aircraft. It was the right man in the right place, watching and transmitting before anyone knew he was there. But in the summer of 1945, as American planners finalized preparations for Operation Downfall, the invasion of the Japanese home islands projected to cost between 250,000 and 1 million American casualties. Toksky received a classified briefing that made everything the 40 thieves had accomplished feel like preparation for something larger than any of them had imagined. The question was no longer whether scout sniper tactics worked. The question was whether they could work at a scale nobody had ever attempted, against a defense that made Kakazu Ridge look like a training exercise. And the answer to that question was about to be made irrelevant by something dropped from a single aircraft on a city called Hiroshima. But what happened to Frank Toksky after the war ended is the part of this story that almost nobody knows. And it is the most important part of all. 40 men recruited from military prisons. 1 lieutenant nobody had heard of. A training program that General Turney called irresponsible and suicidal. That is where this story began. Over 3 parts, we watched those 40 men go deeper behind enemy lines on Saipan than any American unit had gone survive a Japanese tank assault by destroying the armor threatening their regimental command post, convince a skeptical admiral to expand their methods across the entire Pacific, and prove at Kakazu Ridge that 12 men with a radio could accomplish what 3 infantry battalions could not. The 40 thieves changed how America fights war. That part of the story is documented and verifiable. But the cliffhanger at the end of Part 3 asked a different question. What happened to the man who built all of it? What happened to Frank Toksky when the gun stopped? That answer is harder to find, and it tells you something important about the price of being right before anyone else is ready to agree with you. The atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. Japan surrendered on September 2nd. The invasion of the home islands that American planners had projected would cost between 250,000 and 1 million American lives never happened. The Scout Sniper program that Toksky had built that had just been approved for massive expansion in preparation for that invasion became overnight a solution to a problem that no longer existed. The Marine Corps demobilized rapidly. Millions of men went home. Specialized units were disbanded. Classified programs were shelved or quietly terminated. The scout sniper platoons that had fought on Saipan, Tinian, and Okinawa were dissolved as their members separated from service. The training facility at Camp Pendleton closed the advanced reconnaissance curriculum in October 1945. Taxke was offered a regular commission as a captain in the peacetime Marine Corps. He accepted it. For 3 years, he served in administrative roles at Quantico, Virginia, writing doctrine and training manuals that incorporated what the 40 Thieves had learned in the Pacific. Work that was important but invisible, the kind of work that fills filing cabinets rather than history books. He left the Marine Corps in 1948 and returned to Wisconsin. He got married. He worked in local government. In 1956, the citizens of Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, elected him mayor, a position he held for several terms. He was known as a quiet, competent administrator who showed up early and stayed late and never talked about the war. His son Joseph grew up in that house and knew almost nothing about his father's service. Taxke had a footlocker in the basement that was always locked. When Joseph asked about it, his father said it contained paperwork from the service. Joseph never pressed the question. Some things about his father he understood not to push. Frank Taxke died in 2011 at the age of 96. Joseph opened the footlocker the week after the funeral and found inside it 43 years of silence. Maps of Saipan covered in handwritten coordinates. A copy of the after-action report Colonel Risley had filed in June 1944. The classified letter of commendation from Admiral Turner. Photographs of men whose names Joseph did not know. And a single handwritten note that his father had apparently composed sometime in the 1970s and never sent to anyone. The note read, "We lost 9 men permanently. That number stayed with me longer than the other numbers. I have tried to find meaning in it. The best I can do is this. They went in knowing what might happen. They went in anyway. That has to be enough." Joseph Taxke spent 2 years researching his father's service after finding the footlocker. He discovered that most of the surviving members of the 40 Thieves had done something similar. Marvin Strombo, who had fired the bazooka round that destroyed the pillbox at 10:32 a.m. on June 15, 1944, became a high school physical education teacher in Montana and never mentioned Saipan to his students. Bill Knuppel, who had spotted that first Japanese machine gun nest and potentially saved dozens of Marine lives, worked for 30 years as a postal carrier in Ohio. Herbert Hodges, who had destroyed the tank threatening Colonel Risley's command post with a perfect side shot in failing light, ran a hardware store in Pennsylvania until he retired. None of them had been given a parade. None of them had written memoirs. The program they served in had been classified, then disbanded, then largely forgotten as the Cold War reshaped American military priorities around nuclear deterrence rather than ground reconnaissance. But the ideas did not disappear. That is the part of this story that connects 1944 to the present day in ways that would have surprised everyone involved. The Marine Corps formally established Force Reconnaissance in 1957, incorporating the deep reconnaissance and independent operation principles that the 40 Thieves had demonstrated on Saipan. Force recon units deployed in Korea and Vietnam, operating with methods that Taxke would have recognized immediately. Small teams' independent movement position, identification, coordinate transmission, and extraction without direct engagement wherever possible. The United States Navy established the SEAL teams in 1962, drawing on the underwater demolition teams of World War II and the lessons learned by reconnaissance units across all service branches during the Pacific Campaign. The SEAL training curriculum's emphasis on small unit independence decision-making without supervision and operating effectively behind enemy lines in sustained operations traces directly to principles that Taxke wrote into Marine Corps doctrine between 1945 and 1948 at Quantico. The Army's Special Forces, the Rangers, the Delta Force selection process, the modern scout sniper programs across all branches, all of them incorporate the fundamental insight that the 40 Thieves proved operationally in 1944. The most effective reconnaissance asset is not a vehicle or an aircraft or a sophisticated sensor system. It is a well-trained human being, with good judgment operating independently, making correct decisions without orders in situations where orders cannot reach. That insight is now practiced by at least 37 nations that have studied American Special Operations doctrine and incorporated versions of it into their own military structures. The British Special Air Service, the Israeli Sayeret Matkal, the Australian Special Air Service Regiment, all operate on principles that connect through chains of institutional learning to what 12 men proved possible in the jungle above Kakuzu Ridge on April 4, 1945. The total number of American service members who have served in special operations units built on these principles since 1945 exceeds 300,000. The number of operations conducted using deep reconnaissance methods derived from what the 40 Thieves developed is classified and almost certainly runs into the tens of thousands. The number of lives saved by acquiring accurate intelligence before committing infantry to an assault cannot be calculated with precision, but military historians who have studied the question estimate it in the hundreds of thousands across 8 decades of application. 40 men went into a jungle, 300,000 followed them. But the largest lesson from this story is not about tactics or training or the organizational architecture of special operations forces. It is about something more fundamental than any of that. Every genuinely useful innovation in military history faced the same initial response, the same institutional resistance, the same accusation that the idea was irresponsible, untested, contrary to established doctrine, and likely to get people killed. The machine gun was called a novelty that would never replace disciplined rifle fire. The tank was called an engineering curiosity that couldn't survive on a real battlefield. Air power advocates were court-martialed for arguing that aircraft could sink battleships. The men who built the first nuclear weapon were told repeatedly that the physics wouldn't work. In every case, the resistance came from people who were not stupid or cowardly. General Turney was not a fool. He was a man whose entire professional framework had been built around a set of methods that had worked, and he was being asked to abandon that framework on the basis of one successful operation by 40 unconventional men. His skepticism was rational. His institutional position was defensible. He was simply wrong, and the evidence took time to accumulate to a point where being wrong became undeniable. The pattern repeats in every domain where innovation confronts established practice. In business, the organizations that dominated one technological era consistently underestimate the challenge from the next one, not because their leaders are incompetent, but because their entire framework for evaluating evidence is built around the assumptions of the era they succeeded in. Kodak understood photography better than anyone on Earth and still missed the digital transition. Blockbuster understood video rental better than anyone and still missed streaming. The pattern is not about intelligence. It is about the structural difficulty of evaluating a new framework using the criteria of the old one. Taksky succeeded not because he was smarter than Turney, but because he had evidence from direct experience that Turney's framework could not account for. And because he found one senior officer, Admiral Turner, whose position gave him the authority to act on new evidence without first winning a consensus. The lesson for anyone trying to change an institution from inside it is contained entirely in that dynamic. Find the evidence. Find the person with authority who can act on evidence. And be patient enough to survive the period between those two events. Now for the detail that most people who know this story do not know. The detail that changes how the story looks when you step back far enough to see the whole picture. When Joseph Taksky finished his research into his father's service in 2013, he contacted the Marine Corps History Division to share what he had found in the footlocker. The historians were interested. They had records of the 40 thieves from official sources, after-action reports, unit citations, operational logs. But they did not have the handwritten note. They did not have the personal photographs. And they did not have one document that turned out to be significant. Among the papers in Taksky's footlocker was a typewritten letter dated September 14, 1945, 2 weeks after Japan's formal surrender. The letter was addressed to Taksky from a Marine Corps officer named Major Samuel Randall, who served in the intelligence section at Marine Corps headquarters. The letter informed Taksky that Japanese military records captured on Okinawa had been translated and reviewed, and that those records contained a specific document relevant to his program. The document was a directive issued by Japanese 32nd Army Headquarters in April 1945 following the Kakuzu Ridge operation. The directive ordered all garrison units on Okinawa to cease offensive operations against American small unit reconnaissance teams. The reason given in the directive was direct and remarkable. Japanese commanders had concluded that the hunter units assigned to eliminate American reconnaissance personnel were consuming more resources than the reconnaissance teams themselves were costing the defense, and were failing to stop the intelligence transmissions despite their efforts. The Japanese had done the calculation. Hunting the 40 thieves cost more than absorbing the damage the 40 thieves caused. So they stopped hunting and tried to adapt their defensive scheme instead. It didn't work. But the decision itself, documented in a captured enemy directive, confirmed something that Tatsuki had believed since Saipan, but never seen stated explicitly by anyone on the other side. The enemy had decided that 12 American men with radios were not worth 4,000 Japanese soldiers. And they had been right. The 12 men were worth more than 4,000 soldiers. They were worth the intelligence that allowed an entire army to fight smarter, take fewer casualties, and end a campaign faster than any conventional force projection could have managed. Frank Tatsuki knew this. He had known it since June 15, 1944, when he watched naval shells destroy Japanese fortifications that his men had mapped an hour earlier. But seeing it confirmed in a captured enemy document written by officers who were trying to stop him, and had concluded they could not, was something different. Randall's letter said that Tatsuki had been recommended for an additional commendation based on the captured document. The commendation was never issued. The war ended. The paperwork disappeared into the demobilization. Tatsuki put the letter in the footlocker and locked it. He did not mention it to anyone for 66 years. Joseph Tatsuki donated the entire contents of the footlocker to the Marine Corps History Division in 2014. The materials are now archived at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia, where they are accessible to researchers. From 40 men who were considered criminals to a principle that now guides every special operations force on Earth. Frank Tatsuki and his 40 thieves proved something that applies far beyond the Pacific Islands where they fought. The most important resource in any conflict, military or otherwise, is accurate information delivered to the right person before the decision point passes. They proved it at a cost of 9 men permanently lost and a lifetime of silence from the men who survived. They proved it without recognition, without parades, without the institutional acknowledgement that their contribution warranted. They proved it, and then came home and taught school and delivered mail and ran hardware stores and never talked about it. 8 decades later, the forces they inspired are operating on every continent, trained on principles that trace directly back to a locked footlocker in a basement in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. The greatest weapon the 40 thieves carried into the jungle was not a bazooka or a Springfield rifle. It was the willingness to trust that what they knew was true, even when every institution around them insisted otherwise. That willingness does not appear in any military inventory. It cannot be manufactured or requisitioned or issued at supply. It exists only in the people who possess it, and it changes everything when they act on it. If someone in your family served in the Pacific, drop their name in the comments. These men fought alongside people exactly like them. And if this story meant something to you, share it with one person who has never heard of Frank Tatsuki. They deserve to be remembered, every single one of them.